I think that was a good conversation. It's good for smart people to get together and talk about conflicting things. All right. So the database that I'm going to introduce here is something called Firebase. It's actually a Google product. It wasn't a Google product previously. Google acquired Firebase. So Firebase is something known as a real-time database. So it falls into a couple categories. So first of all, it's something called the NoSQL database. So historically, the databases that have existed have been relational databases. So Oracle, MySQL Server, SQL Server from Microsoft, these are all relational databases where we use a language like SQL to talk to the database, to query the stuff. Well, now have you, any of the classes you guys have had in MSIT, have they talked about relational databases at this point?
Yes, Dr. Wall.
Okay. Okay. Yep. So this idea of relational databases, the main focus of relational databases is to minimize the duplication of data, to storage footprint, because these things were conceived in the days when data storage was expensive, right? That's less of an issue now. So what we're seeing now is we're starting to move away from relational databases, not because they're bad, because they've completely fulfilled their needs for a long time and still are today. Oracle is our top tier enterprise level relational database product. Very, very, very fast, blah, blah, blah. Well, as we start changing our worldview, where we're having mobile applications all hitting the same data source from all over the world, we're starting to think more about performance, being able to handle millions and millions and millions of requests per second as being a higher priority than dealing with how much space does the data take up? Because we don't care about that anymore, right? We have 4 terabyte hard drives. Who cares? Okay, we got tons and tons of space now. Well, so there's been this move towards these things called NoSQL databases. So really what you maybe want to think about when you hear that phrase NoSQL, it's almost a synonym for not relational. And when we say relational, typically a relational database is made up of a whole bunch of tables that are related to each other. So we have a user table here, and the user, maybe users are associated with orders. So we have an order table over here. So we have users and we have orders, and all orders are associated with a user, and every user might be associated with many orders, that kind of stuff. So you have these relationships between the tables, hence relational databases. Our NoSQL databases tend to be more focused on objects. So we think about storing things as an object rather than as a relation. So relations are, we have a bunch of data that's floating around and they're kind of connected to each other, okay? And we kind of have to hold that together, where an object is a nice convenient carrying case, right? Okay. Yeah, so these would be kind of our more modern databases, but I don't want to, we are starting to see these become very, very prevalent. So many new applications that are being written are using these types of products as opposed to your traditional relational databases. So for example, a web application. If we were to write a web application 5 years ago, pretty good chance that you'd be using MySQL as the database. It's free, it's fast, and there's plenty of support for it. Now, I'm making these numbers up, so this is my opinion, but I feel that at least half of new products that are being created today are using non-relational databases. They're using things like Firebase or like Parse or like Google App Engine or like Amazon Web Services. They're using these cloud computing platforms, right? Which is just a fancy way of saying, hey, we know how to store stuff in the cloud. We also know how to give you computational resources, but we're going to call it cloud computing, and we're going to charge you for it. So it's we have a lot of buzzwords that all mean the same stuff. Okay, so what Firebase is a real-time database, and the real-time part is actually the coolest part about Firebase. That is, whenever something changes on the database, any apps that are connected to it get the updated change. Okay, and I'm going to try to show that to you today. So let's go ahead and let's get our code connected to Firebase. So it's firebase.google.com. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to, let's see, where's my, let's just go here. Let me click there. That'll probably take me to my dashboard. Okay. All right, so here's some apps I already have in there. That's interesting. I already had that from a different. Because I had some students at a hackathon working on this project one time. We probably can just use this data actually. Well, no. So this is the database. So we'll actually use this database because it's already pre-populated with some stuff. So for instance, here we're only working with dungeons. So forget about the raids down here. So in dungeons, we have heroic and we have mythic. We're also, for us, going to have normals. All right. So under heroic, we have Blackrook Hold, Darkheart Thicket, Eye of Ashara, Halls of Valor. What's this one? Maw of Souls, Netherian's Lair, Violet Hold, and Vault of Wardens. Mythic, we're going to have all those plus a couple of extra ones. Court of Stars, and oh no, that's not that one. Okay, so these are the mythic versions of these. All right, so those are all our dungeons from Mythic. These are all our dungeons from Heroic. Because I know normal exists in those Heroics as well, I'm going to do something here real quick. I'm going to export the JSON of this. I'm going to open that up. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all this. So they went ahead and already put this stuff in by hand. So they've done some of our work for us. So that'll save us our time from our conversation. All right, that's Heroic. There's Mythic right there. All right, so I'm going to copy that. And before the Heroic thing here, I'm going to paste this. Put a comma there. And we're going to call this guy normal. Okay. Then I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to go into the database here, and we're going to import JSON. Upload that file. This is from my downloads. And click import. All right, so there's my normal. So they at the hackathon they spent some time populating this with with some stuff, okay? So if we connect this to what we were just working on, we have a screen in our application called Dungeons, right? And we have 3 different databases, or 3 different arrays in there. One for heroic, one for mythic, one for normal. Under heroic, we have a whole bunch of objects. Under mythic, we have a whole bunch of objects. And under normal, we have a whole bunch of objects. Each of these objects, so for instance, this is one object, which has the name of the dungeon, Black Rook Hold, which within that has, this is like the shorthand for these bosses, like shorthand names. So this would be a shorthand for Black Rook Hold. That's Black Rook Hold, oh, I see it, Black Rook Hold Heroic. So we need to change these. So they call these Black Rook Hold Mythic. Okay, I got it. Let's just make sure the data's right here for us. So this is Black Rook Hold Normal. 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 Oh yeah, because that's yeah. Yeah, because it's not actually gonna hurt. It's not gonna hurt anything. Because they really have an extra level of order here, because they had to decide how to organize their objects. So I mentioned these things are relations like objects. So we have the Black Rook Hold Heroic object, which has a name, Black Rook Hold. Then it has a collection of bosses that are in there. Okay, and this is this boss, this is this boss, this is this boss. I wonder, am I able to edit it at this level? No, doesn't look like it. Okay, well, whatever. Okay, so when we, for instance, let me go back here to zones. When we pull all the dungeon data, what we're going to get is we're going to get all the heroic stuff, all the mythic stuff, and all the normal stuff. Okay? So what I'm going to do here is, and let's just see it hook into the code. So I'm going to go to this little settings thing right here. And I'm going to go to, let's see, project settings, I think. Okay, yep. So they were doing this for an iOS app. So they clicked add app. You can choose for you're going to add Firebase to Android. So you'll choose this guy. And you can type in whatever your thing was, so com.wowprogress, whatever you call your thing in your Android app, or whatever the default is. Then you can give it any nickname. And then it'll give you the instructions for dropping the file. So you'll be doing the equivalent to what I'm going to be doing here in a second. So after you create an iOS thing, it generates this plist file here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to download that plist file. Okay, it's in downloads. Oh, there's already another Google one. Where is that one? Well, I only want the ones in downloads. We'll fix this real easily. Go to my downloads, select all, move to trash, re-download. There I go. All right, so we have that file.
This is the best way. I have been like thinking from 1 month to clear my download.
So you'll do something pretty similar to this on Android. Let me make sure I'm recording here. Yeah, I am. So I'm going to take this file. I'm just going to drag it into my project here. And I'm going to select copy items if needed. So I'm moving this plist file into my code. So Google Services Info plist. This lets my project know about all the stuff it needs to talk to my project on Firebase.
So we do updates like into this file. Which folder do we need to put that file in Android?
Yep. And he'll tell you how to do it. When you go in here and you say add app, after you add this Android thing there, it'll give you an instructions, a tutorial thing for how to do it. Yeah, but it's going to be pretty similar to what I'm doing right now. Okay? So, for example, let me just go to the documentation. We'll go to iOS getting started. You can go to Android getting started. So here's add Firebase to your app. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to get the API associated with our, we need to bring the Firebase stuff into our application. It's actually easier to do this on Android than it is on iOS. So Android, you actually are just going to drop a couple lines in. With iOS, we're going to have to use something called CocoaPods. It's a package management tool. Because what we have right now is we have the Xcode Swift library, and then we have the couple of view controllers we wrote. But now we need access to the Firebase API, the tools that they have, so that we know we have the information about who we need to talk to. Now we need the tools to talk to that guy. All right, so I have the blueprint to build my desk, but I need some tools in order to actually build the desk. I can't actually build it until I have those tools. So I need to get the tools. That's adding the SDK. All right, so the package we're going to be getting is this thing called Firebase Core. So let me show you how this would work on iOS. Android is actually easier. You won't have to do all these extra steps. So when you follow the directions for Android, you'll see that it's not as bad. So let me get into my Dropbox. And then what I call it, WoW Lockout. Okay. So here's the directory where my Xcode project is. Okay. So what I'm going to do in here, I'm using a product. It's a third-party application called CocoaPods. That allows me to do package management stuff. So I already have CocoaPods installed on my computer. I'm going to do pod init. And this will initialize a brand new pod file. So now I'll have something in here called pod file. So if I open up that pod file, it looks like something like this. And I'll go ahead and put in that pod that we need for this guy, the Firebase Core pod. Okay. Now, what's cool about this is there's tons and tons and tons of pods that use CocoaPods. So you could usually, if you go to CocoaPods.org, you can look up all sorts of widgets for iOS applications that are already built, and you can just drop them into your application and use them. Okay, but effectively what we're doing right now, if you were to label this, is we are embedding a third-party API into our application. Okay, we didn't write this, but we'd like to use it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that file. Then we do pod install. So it's hitting the internet, it's grabbing all the Firebase crap, and then what it did is it created a new project for me. So I currently have my Xcode project open here. I'm going to close this. Okay? Because when I look in this directory, notice we have a new guy here called a workspace that it just built for me. So this workspace is a compilation of our original WoW Lockout project and the pod file project that it just came up with, that it just built. And it glued those two together and it called it a workspace. So I'm going to open that workspace.
There was command line for this, the window.
There's not a GUI for it. It's all command line.
No, that is what I was saying. Is it for the Apple? Because for us, it is like command, CMD command base. The window in Windows is different.
Oh, yeah, this is a UNIX terminal. Yeah. All right, so notice here I have two separate projects up here. I have my pods project and I have my normal project we've been working on. Now, you'll never ever touch anything in your pods project except for the pod file, because now you can edit it in here. You saw me edit it from a command line editor, but you could edit it from in here and add stuff to it if you want. All right, but right now we just need access to Firebase stuff. All right, so at this point, we have all the stuff we need. I'm just going to go ahead and do a Command B real quick and let it build so all my libraries will be available to me. Okay, let's go back over here. So I did all this stuff. Now we're supposed to initialize Firebase in our application. Now we've already put that plist file in there. Okay, so now what we do is we're going to go into some part of our code. We're going to import Firebase. So here's my project here. I'm going to go into app delegate. There isn't really an equivalent to app delegate on Android. Android has something called the Android manifest, which doesn't allow you to put logic in. App delegate on iOS is the governing code behind your entire application. The reason why the equivalent to this doesn't really exist on the Android side is because every activity in Android is kind of its own application. Whereas with iOS, an application is a collection of view controllers. That makes sense? So Apple kind of has one more layer of organization. So this is the guy that's in control of an application. So up top here, I'll say import Firebase. So it knew about it, so we're good there. And then I need to tell my app to configure itself, and it will automatically go and look at that that plist that I dropped in there. So that's the real magic. The magic sauce here is this Google Services plist. Has to be named exactly like that. It has all the crazy stuff in there that it needs for our specific project, so that when I just do one line like this, okay, so this guy is called application did finish launching. So think of this like on create, but for your entire application, not for an activity. This is the whole app for iOS. We have that one additional level of organization in iOS. So in here, I'll go ahead and say fire app configure. And that magic line knows to look in here and do all the stuff. Okay, so with that, I've now connected my application to Firebase. Now I can start using my application to talk to Firebase. Okay. Now, here are the available pods. So I'll show you some additional things later, but there is a Firebase database that we'll have to bring in to do real-time database stuff. So Firebase core is what we have right now. We're also going to need Firebase database in order to talk to the database. Okay, so I'll go ahead and steal that. We'll go into our project here. Go into our pod file, add in that additional pod. Go out here, do pod install. It's grabbing Firebase database. It updated the project. Now I build this, and now we have access to the database. So what you just saw there is the power of CocoaPods. I just brought in support, and so I can go to CocoaPods website. If I want to bring in Google Maps support, I'll just put pod Google Maps, install, we have it. And it keeps it always up to date and all that stuff. All right, so now, well, all I did, just for CocoaPods, I add one line here, come out to the terminal, and say pod install. And it does everything. Now, if you've worked with large applications before, and this is something you run into, so maybe you're not able to actually appreciate this, but when you need to bring in a bunch of third-party code, getting each of those things configured to work with your project is usually a pretty time-consuming thing. All right? So if you have a project that needs to use this third-party code and this third-party library and this third-party library and this third-party library, it's probably 2 hours to configure that, 2 hours to configure that, 2 hours to configure that, 2 hours to configure that. Once it's configured, it works. You don't have to deal with it after that. Okay, 10 seconds. Because they built it in the CocoaPods standard way. So CocoaPods is what manages it for me. Make sense? So this idea of these package managers is kind of a popular thing these days. Okay, so now I have access to the database tools, not just the Firebase core stuff. All right, so what we want to do here for iOS is we want to do real-time database stuff. We want to read and write some data. This is for iOS. Oh no, it is Android. I clicked on the Android stuff. That's fine. We'll get back to it. So I just showed you what you're supposed to do for years. All right. So real-time database, iOS, read and write data. There we go. And I'm going to be looking at the Swift version of this. Okay. So in order to read and write data, we're going to need a Firebase database reference. Okay. So I'm going to steal some of this line here. I'm actually going to do this right at the beginning of our code out here. So we're going to do it inside of our dungeon list. So I'm going to give myself a new variable up here. Okay, we're going to import Firebase database. I'll go ahead and give myself, I'm going to set that value of that variable ref. So ref is a variable that will be a Firebase database reference. Trust me. Okay, that's what that thing is. I'm going to set that guy equal to Firebase database reference. So this is going to give me the magical tool that knows how to talk to my real-time database up there. Okay, that guy. All right, now we want to actually read some data from there. Now, I can off of that add some child things to get values out. So I want to listen for events. These are adding things to it. I want to listen for events. Okay, so if we go back to our database here, let's go to this guy right here, and I'm going to go into lockout. I go to database. So inside of my database, I actually have something called zones, and then I specifically want dungeons. So I need 2 children in. So I need child zones and I need child dungeons. So we'll say child zones, child dungeons. All right, so this says go to my top level database, then go to the zones child, then go to the dungeons child. That makes sense? So that's going to give me a pointer to this stuff right here. So if I read from that endpoint, I should be able to get heroic, mythic, and normal stuff. All right. So now I'm going to say self.ref. I'm going to do this as an observe a single event. Actually, let's do. I want to do single event. Let's just do a single event for right now. Because one of the things I mentioned earlier is that Firebase is a real-time database. I can choose to observe something indefinitely, so whenever changes happen to the database, it'll automatically change my app too. The problem with that in this case is we then have to manage that. You know, I can initially read my list of dungeons, but then if we change a dungeon, this is going to get called again. We have to write the logic to handle that. So it's probably more reasonable, since we know what the dungeons are, for us to just read the data once and move on with life, right? All right, so we're going to read it once. So we're going to observe a single event. Okay, the event type is going to be value. Oh, you're killing me. You don't have those things fixed? Yeah, okay. 1 second. Snapshot. So usually it would finish this line for you, but it isn't auto-completing. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we have a variable called snapshot. So this is what it gets from the database. We're going to let a variable called data be equal to the value of that snapshot as a collection of name value pairs. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say print data dot debug description, because it'll look cleaner. I'm going to go ahead and put a breakpoint right here, just so we see the project stop there. And when we see that, it's going to print to the console here all the data from our database under dungeons. Okay. Let's go ahead and run this. So this will be the proof that we have accurately connected to the database. All right. Stop, will reset device. Oh, we have a slight problem, but this is actually okay. I'm going to throw that away. We use the old project that doesn't have that bundle identifier. So I'm going to come into Firebase here. We're going to go into settings, project settings. Yeah, see, it's using COM proximal while lockout, so I'm actually going to add a new app, iOS. That's our actual name thing. Okay, and we'll not put anything like that in. We're going to say add app. Okay, now it downloaded the correct file. So this is taking you through the configuration, so you'll see the Android version of this after you do it. All right, so I have all of these things now. So did it... Okay, so this is my new one. So I'm going to go ahead and actually, well, I don't have to delete it. I'll just leave it. Okay, so I have that new thing here. So now I can go in here and I can drop that guy in here just like I did before. Make sure it copies. We're going to get rid of this one. All right, so now I have a new version of the InfoPlist that has my correct stuff in it. Okay, so now I think it should run better. Let's see. That looked good. Where's my dungeon list? Let me stop it here. Let's make sure it's getting to that line. So if this isn't happening, that means it's not actually getting a response back. Okay, so we're getting to this line. So we want to observe a single event of any value with the snapshot. So I'll hit play. So we should be sitting here waiting for this guy to return. And this requires network access, but I wonder why that's not actually coming back. Failed to fetch default token, com Firebase code 6. Yeah, it's trying to connect to Firebase, but it's not able to connect to Firebase. Default token. All right, let's see. Might have shot ourselves in the foot here by using the old project. Oh, I bet you they have the thing set up for push notifications and stuff too, which is going to have require a lot more permissions. No. Come on. Okay. Let's see if that fixed it. Maybe the other app was conflicting with it. Get rid of that. Because this should be printing out a dump of our database.
Last line, 26.
Yeah, 26. But this is, it says it can't connect to our database using the default token. Okay. So we're going to fix this real quick.
We change the file, we are not supposed to again reconnect it with the...
I don't know if it's necessarily an issue, but let's just make sure that's not the problem. So I'm going to go here. Here's our WoW lockout guy right here. I guess we can manage that. I'm going to delete this project. We're just going to start a brand new fresh project that hadn't been previously touched. So we're going to call this guy WoW lockout. We're fine. I did just delete one. Okay. I think I have a credit card. Unused. Shouldn't have to go through that loop. Let's just get rid of all projects that I'm not currently using. Then I can do the whole request thing later for more. I'm betting it's 5 is the amount they give you by default. All right, so this one is important. This one is important. I can get rid of this one though. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so now we're at 4. Should be able to create a new one now. Lockout. Create a project. Come on, people. It's kind of a crappy thing. It takes you to, was that the problem, is I don't have a billing account set up with this particular thing? Okay. I just want to show you the connection. All right. Since you're going to do this on your own project anyways, let's just, well, no, I mean, I'll show you, we'll just make it work here real quick. I'm going to take an existing project that already works.
Or you can show it how to do it right on Android and take a quick look.
Let's see. So let's dump this one, download this one. Get rid of that. Trash. Oh wait, that's not gonna work either. Oh my gosh, you're killing me. All right, so I'm gonna add an app. We're gonna add an iOS app. There's our bundle ID. Whatever. Add app. Close this. There's that. Go to this. There's our new plist. Copy it. Now the database for this guy doesn't have as many things in it, so this just gets us events and members. So just for the sake of argument here, I won't. It won't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Let's see. So I'm going to go to my dungeon list. I'm going to take the two children off here because the one I'm doing right now doesn't have zones and dungeon. So it just has the two top level things. And then we should get in there now. All right. So I'm going to hit play here on print data debug. And it shows me all my data that's in there. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's going to show you that data. So what we want to do as the next step is, and so this is kind of where you guys will pick up on yours, is instead of hard coding your dungeons like this, where I just put in normal one, blah, 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 actually populate it with the real data from the database. That makes sense? So now what I'll give you as a starting point, I'll give you this Xcode project for starters, just so you can look at the logic that we did here. It might be easiest, let's see, it might be easiest for you to look at maybe just dungeon list is going to give you enough of the logic to, all right, so I'll give you dungeon list, and then I'll also give you, I'm going to export our, dodge the bullet here, I think. Put back. We almost lost our JSON, the whole database, all that stuff as well. So I'll give you dungeon list, and I'll give you while lockout export JSON, so that you can import it into your database on Firebase, Google.com. So you have all that data. You don't have to put it in by hand. So now what your project should do is look just like this, with a normal, heroic, and mythic button. But when you click on normal, it should show you the list of all the normal dungeons. When you click on heroic, it should show you the list of all the heroic dungeons. Mythic, the list of all the mythic dungeons. You don't have to show bosses or anything yet, just the list of those dungeons. So you're going to be proving that you can bring an Android application up to date with this, and you're actually reading the data from a database. Make sense? All right, so I'm going to go into Slack, and I will drag that JSON file in there as well as our dungeon list file, just for some of the logic. It's not, you might not even need that, but let's see. Okay, so here is that file. All right, so that's that JSON file. And then I will go ahead and do this. And I'm just going to do it this way. This is all right, that makes sense? All right, and actually I'll just give you one more thing here. I'll give you the link to Firebase. Here's Firebase Android getting set up. And then real-time database, Android, read and write data. All right, I think that should give you everything you need. Okay, and I will, I guess, request those additional things so I get for next time. So we do meet next week, but next week will be our last in-class meeting because I leave a week from Friday. But next week we'll talk about like the final project, and we'll figure it all out. Sound good?
So we